Today, we are talking about how to use technology and AI to improve your lead generation and your customer experience. My guest today is Mike Hutzel. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of this show, and if you've listened before, which hopefully you have, you know every week I talk to smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies. We've had Netflix, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, Grubhub, Redfin, lots of great episodes. We had Gusto recently. Go check out the archives and you can listen to those episodes. And of course, this episode brought to you by Rise25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. Go to rise25.com. You can learn all about our new podcast co-pilot platform, where you can email us at support@rise25.com. All right, Mike, first shout out to Anthony Vidergauz, my friend and neighbor, lives close by to me and connected us, even though we are on opposite ends of the country. And Anthony is a former CEO and owner of California Closets. Had him on the podcast a while back. It's a great story about how he made that really a household name and a great brand. But Mike, you are the CEO of EagleONE Group. It's a technology-enabled company specializing in a number of different service lines. We'll get into all of them, including customer experience, lead generation, digital marketing. It's got a new platform we're going to be talking about as well. And he has a varied background, including interest in studying English and literature like I did at the beginning of my career, and also a contributor to the Franchise Bible. So he's been active in the franchise space, and we'll talk about that as well. And also, fun fact, he is the premier gummy bear connoisseur, or one premier. I mean, I don't know if you can really say that you are the premier gummy bear connoisseur. The man must really love gummy bears if he puts that on his formal bio. But Mike, you moved even more than I did as a kid. I feel like I moved a lot when I was a kid. I believe you were a military brat, lived in 12 different states when you're growing up. Tell us about it.
Yeah. It was kind of cool, John. I mean, it's all we knew, so it was normal for us to pick up and move. Most of our time in the States was down south, so Florida, South Carolina, Georgia for a while, Tennessee. But it was a lot of fun to pick up and move. Even though it seemed a little daunting, what it taught me, I think I mentioned to you too, we lived across the pond over in Germany for 3.5 years. It showed me that the world was a really small place, that everybody was not like me, and that I had to be thick in my own skin, comfortable with who I was, because, we had to make friends quickly. We had to part ways quickly. And it taught me a lot about just being part of the world as it is, not living in some kind of bubble.
Yeah. I felt like moving around as a kid did the same for me. And I didn't move as much as you did, but every time I moved, it seemed like it was cross country a lot of times. And it was funny because when I got to college and there were people that were homesick, I was like, what do you mean homesick? I mean, aren't you used to this? Meeting new people. It just came natural to me.
Yeah. Well, and what's fun too is each place kind of had its own culture. Dad was Army, and for the most part, we were on Army posts or Army bases. But in Germany, back in the 80s, there was no Army post or base, so Dad was stationed on an Air Force base. And so that was its own learning culture all by itself, because airmen, and this is kind of a running thing in the military branches as it is, but airmen are typically treated well because they're flying planes and things like that. So mom and dad had access to things in Germany that we would have never had access to on an Army base. So not only did we get in touch with our quote unquote culture, I mean, Hutzel is German at the end of the day, but we got and that's where, by the way, that love for gummy bears. We actually lived off base in a little town called Carl, and at the center of town was a candy shop, among other things, a bar and a barber shop. But we always used to go in with Deutschmarks. Back then it was Deutschmarks, not euros, and of just a few Deutschmarks, and you could have a pile full of wonderful gummies. And so it's been a lifelong passion ever since.
Yeah. My father was an Air Force brat and grew up on and around military bases. And so I feel like it shaped my childhood a bit, in part because we moved because of his job, and in part because I just heard about it all the time, what the experience was like. And you actually ended up mowing lawns, spray painting numbers on curbs to make money. Do you recall what that was like? Were you driven to make money because you didn't have a lot, or what drove that?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. So, a lot of people will say, well, growing up, I was lower middle class. I mean, I just come out and say it, John. We were poor growing up. I mean, I was the oldest of five boys on a military salary. And if you've ever been anywhere near a base of any kind, regardless of branch, the surrounding area of the base is pretty lower economic, and you'll see tattoo parlors and strip clubs and all the fun stuff that comes along with that
Yeah.
lifestyle. So, because there wasn't a lot to go around, and because we lived paycheck to paycheck, quite literally, with dad's salary, we were hustling any way we could to make money legitimately that had dad smiling on us versus, some of our peers back then where there's some shadier stuff going on. It was better just to go out and earn it.
Yeah.
And then that way you had pocket change to do what you wanted to do with your friends.
And you say dad smiling on you. Was he encouraging that, or did you just mean that he was approving that you weren't, out there like spray painting buildings or something like
Yeah,
that?
well, I think with dad, I mean, he was a lot of things during his time in the Army. He was 101st Airborne Vietnam era, so that came with its own set of consequences. But for a long stretch, he was a drill sergeant, so he was kind of the kind of Army guy. And so we that's how we lived. That's how we grew up. And so we wanted to keep dad happy with and have him proud of us too. We knew he was serving our country. Mom was, we had to kind of be grown up in our own skin a little bit because mom was managing five kids. And so if we were caught doing something, we wanted it to be productive. We wanted to make sure that we were contributing to the cause. So it was from a very early age, it was much more not about self and about the cause, right? The whole family a lot of times. And there was times where we chipped in when we had a pocket change or whatever, that it was necessary to do that. That's just what you did back in the 70s, early 80s, I guess. But it's all we knew. But it was nice to have a little bit of control of your own income. And we knew the more we did, the more we earned.
Yeah. You mentioned the Vietnam War. One of the transformational experiences for me was a class that I took in college with a mentor of sorts, Walter Capps, who was a professor at my college and then later was elected to Congress. And he taught this class that was about the impact of the Vietnam War and the impact that it had on the entire generation and even the generation after it. So our generation, my father also was served in the Air Force in the Vietnam era. I don't know if you've thought about that and the impact that had for you with your father being a Vietnam veteran, obviously the horrors that many of them went through and how that kind of impact you and your generation and your siblings.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it impacted the parenting aspect. I mean, I don't know how, what impact it had on your dad. I mean, we learned a lot of hard lessons, a lot of growing up quick kind of lessons during that phase. But I'll tell you, John, to be honest, I wouldn't trade that, right? I really think I can attest to saying that a lot of that sort of gritty, tough upbringing attributed to my ability to later be an entrepreneur, because you just didn't take no for an answer. You just kept going until you got to where you wanted to be or whatever. And I still feel like that. I mean, we've certainly accomplished quite a bit in our history here at EagleONE and with Frintz and all this fun stuff we've got going on. But I'm still striving. I'm still searching. I'm still trying to get to the next level. And I can tell you that comes from how I was raised.
Yeah. Now, you actually studied English during undergrad, and you actually went and got your master's degree in English as well. You taught business writing, business presentation, essay writing, resume writing. Talk a little bit about how that led to what you do today. Is that lead you to, advising businesses from that background, or do you see that as more of a detour?
No, certainly not a detour. I think it was a fundamental block. I mean, it's kind of a joke, right? I went from Renaissance man to businessman, what feels like overnight. But the time in the classroom that it was teaching just in general is a service, right? It's a service-based business. And so there's no accident that I'm in a service-based organization, and that's what we do. We serve people. It also helped me in a lot of ways. I mean, imagine it's one thing I do quite a bit of speaking in different industries because of the franchise stuff and a few others. But at the end of the day, when you're standing in front of a classroom full of people who may or may not want to be there, and you've got to sell them on your concept because that's the curriculum, that was a ton of life skills, plus the one-on-one. So I would argue that we're a very relationship-oriented organization because I'm a very relationship-oriented person. And that teaching time, I think, for me was a really key element to everything else I've been doing. And it made me really comfortable in front of groups or whatever to be able to express ideas, organize them, and help people at the end of the day, not just get up and speak and have everybody kind of tune out, but really speak in a way that's going to have people taken away from, something valuable when you're done talking.
So after your master's degree, you move into consulting. What type of consulting did you do at that point?
Yeah, so what we decided to do was there was a bunch of, I had the good fortune of having a great cohort in grad school, but I also had, again, relationships, I guess. A lot of folks that I was still friends with from high school who'd went on to college and gotten into business of their own, right? Different verticals, et cetera. So the idea is that we were pulling talent back then and trying to make an entrepreneurial run of providing value, right? Bringing whatever assets you had and then bringing people to the table. So we had all kinds of projects. I mean, I can remember a project that for a few years that we had with an auction real estate company where we were helping them not only on site with some of their auctions, but some of the ways that they were helping their clients get funded. There was we did a lot of stuff in the payment processing world for a while because there were opportunities there, the banking sector. And so during that evolution, I got exposed to a lot of verticals. So we never wanted to fall into the trap of being everything to all people. But what it taught me is that different verticals really aren't altogether that different. Some of the needs are similar. Some of the people are similar. Some of the challenges they face as businesses are similar, even though they're selling a different product or service. And so what we found really quickly was a lot of the things that we were building was all about systems, about consistency and discipline and things like that. And so those were applicable project to project, vertical to vertical. And, if you look at kind of how agnostic we are now with the service divisions, you can kind of point back to that and go, oh, that's why your portfolio is client agnostic. That's why the services there's such a breadth of services is because those are all things in our world now, they all fit under the realm of marketing. But at the end of the day, it's a pretty diverse group of services that services a pretty diverse group of people. And so I got all that experience back then.
Frankly, just to reflect on it, it makes sense for that scrappy kid who grew up around bases that was looking to please dad and was looking to put a few extra bucks in his pocket or in the family's pocket.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it was about, it's about identifying the need, right? So if you think about something as simple as painting numbers on that was Dad's idea, by the way. I mean, I'd love to sit here and go, I was a bright entrepreneur at age 7 or whatever, but Dad was like, well, look, if you want money, go earn it. We don't have any extra, so go figure it out. And he goes, well, what about this? He goes, and he gave me the idea, and for whatever a can of spray paint and those little number bars we had, it didn't take long. We were able to charge like $1 or something, whatever it was. And at the time, for 15 minutes of your time, that was big money for, an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old or whatever. And so it was about identifying the need, or at least recognizing it. And so that translated well later into that consulting stuff.
Funny thing about that is that I saw a young 16-year-old guy a while back named Blake who was advertising that on localnextdoor.com internet site recently. That exact thing, painting numbers on curbs. And I saw he posted it and I thought, oh, that's so cute that he's doing that. And I messaged him privately just to give him a little advice, thinking, oh, here I am, this entrepreneur, I give him some advice. Did he school me? He messaged me back and politely said, oh, because I was like, you're charging 15 or $20. You're not going to make that much money. You should try and do something more scalable. Well, it turns out he would just get a toehold through these postings. One person would say oh, come do my curb. And then he'd go knock on every door in the neighborhood, say, I'm doing your neighbor down the block. And he'd get a bunch of them. Then he'd go through and spray paint them all in once. And he'd make hundreds of dollars. And here I thought he was making 15 or $20 a pop. So I thought it was so cool to see that. So anyways, it's good, to know that one service is continuing on. But I want to ask you about, With consulting, sometimes the challenge with consulting is to go from you performing a service to then building a team, getting yourself out of actually doing the work. And you had an interesting approach to this. You end up forming a consortium of consultants called the Templar Group. So talk a little bit about that next evolution of the business.
Yeah. Well, what I realized pretty quickly was being a consultant, it was also meant being vulnerable. And I mean that on two sides of the coin, John. So it was vulnerable on my end, knowing that most likely any project I took on was going to be finite. So I had to not only bring value, but then I had to recognize that value eventually I had to hand the baton over to the business owner or whatever. The other side of it was I recognized pretty quickly that the business owner had to be vulnerable to me. In other words, they had to admit at some point along our conversation to become a client that they didn't have it all figured out, right? And so and this is back to my military roots, is you just say who you are and who you're not, kind of thing. There's no reason to, there's no faking it till you make it. Well, I knew what my background was. I knew I was good at things like cleaning up collateral and verbiage for manuals and all my English background, right, and all that kind of stuff. But what I wasn't necessarily good at was, financial records or tax implications or whatever else could be. So my thought, in forming the Templar Group was, look, let's get some like-minded people with this primary thing. It started with their value system, right? It wasn't so much about what they did or who they did it for. It was, do they as a professional, do their values align with mine? Are they transparent and honest and candid and all the things that matter to me internally, because it matters at the end of the day to the client? And so that was kind of my judgment call. Is, in retrospect, it was slightly naive. I probably turned down some talent that probably could have benefited some of the clients we were working with if I'd have just kind of gotten over myself maybe a little bit. But at the end of the day, I don't regret it, because we never had any projects that went afoul. I never had to second guess somebody's intentions. If they made a recommendation for a client that was beyond my scope of knowledge, I could trust it. And so it was and it still is a lot of fun. We still work on projects together. It's like an old fraternity now, I guess, in some ways. It's not as front and center as it once was back in the early 2000s, but it's certainly alive and well.
And you end up spinning out EagleONE Group into one hub, one umbrella. Talk a little bit about the decision to why you did that. That was about 10 years ago.
Yeah. So 2014, we were already doing a lot of consulting or let's call it partnership sourcing in some of these areas. And so we were getting more and more expertise, and the patterns just started to come up for us, at least, that, we haven't even talked about my business partner, Diane, and her background, but the reality is that we wanted more and more control for the client, and less reliance upon systems that were beyond our control. And so the decision got made to spin out EagleONE with the idea that we could control, really the quality of the service delivery from soup to nuts. And it was easy for us to do that because we already had a client portfolio. We already had a working awareness of a lot of the services that we provide now and how they work. And we knew that it was a combination of technology and good people. And so we made the decision to own it. And we took the leap off the ledge that way, and we built it. And here we are, 10 plus years later.
And you mentioned your business partner, Diane, is actually your mom. How did you end up starting the business together?
Yeah, so Diane, it's been a great marriage from a partnership perspective in this regard. Not only does she have all the same values, and I mean, she raised 5 boys, right? She was a military spouse. She lived everything I lived plus some, right? Plus all the responsibilities of being the parent. But her expertise is operations, right? Mm-hmm. And she comes from a long 30 plus year history in the call center space. And so it only made sense for her to be involved in this, because she could bring those decades of experience to the CX division that we have and the lead generation division. And those really were our foundational divisions, and we were able to put our digital marketing on top, and then Frintz is our latest greatest thing. But at the end of the day, it was that foundation and that operational experience that I could trust. And so the partnership works so well because even though we make collective decisions, I'm all things relationships and our franchisees and, our partnerships and strategic alliances. She's all things operations. And so we're in our own lane for the most part. And, there's a real blessing in working with family. Now, we fight like family sometimes, but at the end of the day, I don't have to worry about where her motives lie and what our end game is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious how, with raising 5 kids, moving around so many different times, moving to areas which wouldn't necessarily have a call center, how did she manage to keep her career in spite of all those things that are happening and in one industry?
So, mom, and this is also part of where I learned to find opportunity where it knocks. Mom was a lot of things when she was being a mom. So she worked near the bases sometimes. She worked in retail. This is back in the 70s and 80s now. She was finding employment where there was employment to help while, as she could as a military spouse. When that ended, she was able to really catapult her career. So her background is actually in quantitative and qualitative analysis in the market research area. And so she was really able to catapult her career in the late 80s and early 90s when the family moved back to Cincinnati. And that's when she really took off with what she was doing.
Got it. And obviously technology has changed a lot over the years. You talk about EagleONE being a technology-enabled company. What are some ways that technology are being used as we record this? We're in the heading into the second quarter of 2024 now. So what are some technologies that are really effective for the customer experience and lead generation, digital marketing these days?
Yeah, so there's a lot of great platforms. I mean, I'll just kind of break them apart a little bit, but like with the CX division, for example, we plug into the Genesis platform, which is one of the Cadillac platforms for call centers. And the way I've always explained it to clients, John, is at the end of the day, the technology is great, but it empowers the people. It empowers the strategy, right? So it's really a combination. That's the reason we kind of put it that way on our website, the technology enabled company, right? So it empowers our people to be better, smarter, faster. Things like AI and I know that's a hot topic now. That's really enabled us to really drill down on some of our strategic messaging, things like email campaigns, some of the scripts we write for our CX clients when we're engaged in the first place. So it also helps. I mean, I think a lot of our clients come to us because they're looking for not only best practices and subject matter expertise, but they're looking for visibility. And I think the technology in a lot of ways helps us provide that visibility, even something as simple as a telephony platform like Genesis. And the smarter that the technology gets, the more transparency we can give our clients about their users' experience. And it allows them to make appropriate adjustments on how they're servicing their customers. So it's a real value add for our clients anyway. So because they're able to really look at data now and go, oh, here's a trend, or here's a pattern, or here's a response that maybe is out of the blue that we didn't expect about a product or service. So it really helps us leverage that technology on behalf of our clients to serve their own customers better.
And as hiring practices have changed and the workforce labor pool has really opened up and kind of a global workforce now, have you zeroed in on a few countries like people traditionally do in the call center space, or are you hiring people all over the globe? Where are you sourcing your team members from?
Yeah, so all of our team members are United States based, so we're a domestic organization. There's a couple reasons for that. It doesn't mean there's bad options offshore or nearshore. There are great options, right? For us, it's a cultural thing. For us, it's if we're going to say we're a military, family-based, faith-based organization, that's part. But part of it is some of our clients sort of expect that from us, right? They've tried the alternatives. And they want now the beauty of where we are today versus prior to COVID. In the heyday of the call center world in the States, it was always about how many butts in seats was a common phrase. How many butts do you have in seats? And can I come kick the tires in your call centers? And we've lived through those days, right? COVID has really reshaped everybody's mindset around the idea that it's perfectly fine to work from home. Now, we started experimenting working from home long before in fact, we were doing it in our consulting days way back like 08, 09, using people that were remote. A lot of them were active duty spouses and veterans, right? And
yeah, and that opens up a not just a talent pool for you, but really like work opportunities for those spouses too. You know, that they can do remotely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and so our population today, we have a pretty, and I would want Diane to quote the actual number, but we have a significant portion of our call center staff that's active duty spouses for that very reason. By the way, they're great employees, right? I mean, they're disciplined, they're diligent, they show up, they're appreciative of the fact that they can go from location to location like we did when Dad was in the service and not lose their job. They bring real, and they even bring supervisor and team lead kind of talent to the table.
By the way, how do you find them? Is there like I've seen job boards for moms, but I haven't seen any job boards for military spouses. Maybe there is one out there.
There are several, actually. I'll send you a list. I don't want to get too far in the rabbit hole, but there's some great organizations that focus nothing on nothing but veterans and spouses.
Yeah, that's great. We should put that in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to send those to you because these are organizations we've been affiliated with for a very long time. We still do a lot in the veteran-owned business space from a client perspective as well. Why? Because it's near and dear to our heart, right? It's who we are. It's what we know. We know the speak. They know us. That kind of thing. But the active duty spouses, you'd be amazed at just how traditionally appreciative they are in general of being able to have good gainful employment. And you think about the kind of employment we're offering. Not only is it stay at home kind of stuff, but it's white collar work. It's not go out and man a grocery. And I'm not belittling any job in any stretch, but it's not the more acceptable near the base kind of activity that they might find if they landed there new and needed to go out and get a job.
Yeah. Yeah. And you find that they're motivated, that helps motivate them. You know, the old school thinking was you needed to pack a room full, conference room with all these different phone lines and people working next to each other, whether it was outbound or inbound or whatever. So instead, it's kind of a model of they're at home. They're not surrounded by a bunch of other colleagues, and they're either placing phone calls or receiving incoming phone calls from their home. That's
right. Well, and remember, now back to technology. There is a little bit of camaraderie and fellowship with the technology. So a platform like Genesis, for example, allows them to communicate in a Slack type environment. That really, and they do form teams. I mean, we do try to build. One of the things that EagleONE's always been really, I mean, this stems from our history, I guess, but we call it the EagleONE family. And I'll tell anyone who will listen, John, that I endearingly call us the Island of Misfit Toys. And that's that old Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, reference there. But I say that in a very endearing way because we can accept all sorts of folks, right? And they're judged on their talent. They're judged on how they treat their colleagues, how they treat our clients, the work that they do. And you'd be amazed at the different eclectic group of people we can attract because they do have the perk from working from home. And that allows them to have a different kind of lifestyle, right? The commute is from the top floor to the bottom floor. If they have to have their kid at home that day or whatever life brings their way, they're allowed to do that as well and still form a camaraderie and a fellowship.
Yeah, we're the same way. Actually, I think we're majority female, maybe even majority mom. And I love it when I see a baby pop up in the Zoom window, Yeah. And you, I was going to ask you about, AI. Obviously it's a hot topic these days. A lot of people saying that it'll replace a lot of workers. I went through a Starbucks drive-through a couple of weeks ago, and after I placed my order and we were going up to the next window, I was like, that seemed like it was an AI or something. And my son, who's 13, was like, "Oh yeah, Dad, I've seen videos on YouTube. McDonald's and Starbucks and stuff are using these AIs for just the order placing. Not obviously. There's a man who handed me the order when we got up to the window, but I think the first portion of it was actually AI. So, do you see AI having a big impact on your industry? And if so, how are you studying it? How are you monitoring it right now?
Yeah, well, we're certainly keeping an eye on it, and we use it. There's a couple of platforms we use now. I don't. I mean, I'm briefed on the idea, but the team talks about it quite a bit. There is real value to it. I don't know that. So to us in the call center world, at least, right now, it's sort of an equal comparison to something like a standard issue IVR. Right. So every consumer at this point is used to calling any organization just about and getting an automated press one, press two, press three kind of thing. So it really hasn't inundated the call center space from a starting to take away people. Now, there are certain organizations like we have, again, we're client agnostic. So like our e-com clients are moving more and more quickly to that sort of self-serve model and less human interaction. But ironically, people still buy from people, John. So there's still a very real aspect. I mean, real aspect of I want a human voice. I want a human at least chat or email exchange or something, right? And we're still big believers that people buy from people. We've long since embraced technology. We will do that with AI as well, so long as it is empowering our people.
And certainly digital marketing is one area that you also focus on, and that has traditionally embraced technology and now is embracing AI as well. So you probably have more of it in that area.
Yeah, it's our fastest moving division, or let me say it differently, fastest changing division. I mean, I have one frustration with the whole concept of digital marketing, even though we have that whole division. And it's as soon as we master something else is out there, right? Yeah. So we master Facebook, then there's Twitter. We master Twitter, then there's YouTube. We master YouTube,
changing,
then, and so it's a good challenge, right? Because it's keeping us on our toes. It's helping us understand what the next generation is expecting. And by the way, if you think about how we're structured, what that digital marketing division and that pace that it keeps, it really actually ends up trickling back to our lead generation division and our CX division. Why? Well, because it's telling us what the next generation of decision makers are about. Like an easy example would be, if you think about the old smile and dial days of call centers, right? It was about how big your list was, how many agents you could put on it, and how many people you could get to say no before you got somebody to say yes, right? Mm-hmm. Well, and there was an old adage of about 3 to 5 touches on a person, and you would get a yes or a no. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now we're touching people 12 to 15 times, especially when it's a sophisticated business purchase, right? Mm-hmm. And we're not just touching them on the phone. We're touching them over LinkedIn. We're touching them in email. A lot of times we're trying to solicit and have them self identify as being in the market for that before we market to them at all for our clients. Mm-hmm. Because the decision makers are, even on the business side of the world, are very, very persnickety. They're very sophisticated. And the younger they get, the more digitized they are. So they're expecting the technology. They're expecting to be able to vet our clients in a way that involves technology of some kind long before they're willing to have a buying discussion.
Now, let's talk about your newest division, which is your Frintz division, which actually you had 7 or 8 years of R&D on this. So talk a little bit about the concept and what it is.
Yeah, so my partner on that division is a brother from another mother, Bill Testa. I've known Bill half a lifetime. It's kind of one of those. It's a fun story. He came to me 7 years ago or so, and it was literally the idea on the back of a napkin. And he goes, "Mike, what do you think?" I said, "Bill, that's brilliant, man. Let's do it. Let's do it." Now, I had no idea it was going to take this long, and I had no idea that the patenting process was so long, painful, and expensive. But we wanted to do it right. And we're not going to be able to cover it all today, but effectively we have created our own new marketplace. So the way I tell it from a high level is, once upon a time, Twitter or Facebook or YouTube didn't exist. Once upon a time, Frintz didn't exist. We believe in the next 24 months, it will be a household name. It will be an app on every iPhone or Android. And it's a combination, John, of patented technology, patented process, and first-party data extrapolation. We've created a marketplace in which we control who gets in from a consumer perspective, an advertiser perspective, and a client perspective. And it's the first time in my career that it's a business unicorn. It's not a commodity. I'm used to selling commodities in the other divisions. Everybody, if I say call center service, everybody knows what that means. If I say Frintz, they go, what? And so we launched it last year very quietly, just like you would any new product or service. We didn't really start telling the world until last fall. Last fall, we were invited to be the featured platform at Adweek in New York City. Then we were invited to the Visual First Summit in San Francisco, which is Google's photo summit. And then we were invited to the ANA Summit. And so those three events for us were a sort of the telling of the world approach. And since then, it's been, as you might expect, lights out.
So explain to the layman what it is, because it's free prints you get in the mail, right?
It is free prints. You know what I'll give you, John, is I'll send you a link to what we call a packet presentation for your show notes. So your users can, or your audience can listen or look at it. But effectively, think of it this way. Consumers get the opportunity to get all of their photos for free delivered to their home. Okay.
Yeah.
Advertisers get the what's unheard of in the direct mail world. They get 100% open rate, and
people will open. You're guaranteed to open the prints. Yeah.
Yeah. The packet looks, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. The packet looks like this. Okay. Yeah. Except it's branded from our packet sponsors. So the reason we get 100% open rate and 100% visibility rate is because the consumers, when they order their photos, they're waiting on them. And and as you can see here from this photo, the advertiser is attached right to the photo, right? So it's all the consumer has to do is something like this and break off the photo, and the advertiser's ad is seen from every photo, right? So in the traditional direct mail world, as you might already know, they expect a 1 to 3% efficacy rate. We're getting 100%, right? With the packet sponsors that we have, these are logos that we can talk about another time, but these guys, they are able to monetize their consumer population. They're able to grow their advertiser and or vendor population. And the real sort of gem or piece de resistance, if you will, is the fact that our patented technology, the data extrapolation from the photo, we're able to extract every data point from every photo. So people oftentimes say a picture's worth 1,000 words. We say a picture's worth 10,000 attributes.
So if they have a picture of themselves in front of their new Ford Mustang, then it pulls that out. Yeah.
Well, and here's what's really cool about it. With the new rules around cookies and these kinds of things, where they're pulling that away, even if cookies were still at its heyday, cookies are a tendency-based approach to marketing. If I click on a bourbon ad, I might also be interested in a cigar ad. Might. When you look at a photo and you extract data, that's a fact, right? I've already bought the bourbon. I've already bought the cigar. I'm already on the beach, whatever the scenario is. We give that data to our packet sponsors, our clients, okay? And effectively, we're enabling them to know things about their client population that they didn't know before their partnership with us.
Really interesting. So like, again, to use the car analogy, if someone's just bought a brand new Ford Mustang, then maybe someone who sells, Mustang seat covers might want to market to that person because they might be in the market for buying seat covers to go with their Mustang.
Exactly. And the brilliance is we're not selling PII. So we can't.
What does that stand for?
Personal identifiable information.
Okay.
So if you think about like compliance-based industries like the banking sector or the healthcare sector, or even folks who just have great brand champions, right? They I don't want to sacrifice my consumer data. Well, they're not. Okay, what we're doing is we're giving them their updated intel from the photos, but an advertiser only gets a new customer if the consumer chooses to be an advertiser or to act upon that ad. And what the advertisers really like is we give them the demographics, right? So we give them the stats, demographics, geographic, psychographics. They can make an educated business decision on whether or not they want to advertise to that particular group or not. And it's diverse, right? If you I always kind of joke when I'm talking with packet sponsors about what would a Hutzel family packet look like. Well, if my wife ordered the photos from a vacation, here's what you would see. You would see us on the beach. You would see our Labradoodle Paco. You would see my boys and I on a charter fishing boat. You would see me with a cigar and a bourbon. You would see us at some eclectic restaurant. Mm-hmm. Well, if I'm a Chewy customer, for example, Chewy might not know any of those 10 things about me, but now they do.
Yeah, interesting.
So it opens up the world of what's a legitimate ad worth to that consumer, right? Because of what we already know about them.
It's a really interesting idea. I'm mindful of the clock. We're almost out of time, so I want to wrap up with my last question, which is, I'm a big fan of gratitude, especially expressing gratitude to those peers, contemporaries, mentors who've helped you in your journey. Who would you want to acknowledge and thank?
Yeah, I'll do it really quickly. I would start with my spiritual mentor, who I lost in 2020, Jerry Sasson. He was with me for 9 years, a dear friend. He was part dad, part uncle, part grandfather, and part business mentor for sure. He's a lot of the reason why we have so many intangibles here at EagleONE. I'd also attribute our board: Anthony Vitergauz, who you mentioned in the beginning, Dave Cook, Kathy Blackwell, Aaron Bakken, Rick Grossman, and Mark McClellan, all legitimate experts in their own expertise, who all come from different worlds, who keep Diane and I on our toes. And lastly, I would say, Diane, my mom, has been a huge impact on me personally, my whole life, obviously, but a lot of the hardcore lessons that I learned growing up has helped us build EagleONE to what it is today.
Mike, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you and EagleONE and Frintz?
Yeah, just go to EagleONEgroup.com. That's Eagle, common spelling, the number 1, numeric 1, group, common spelling.com. And it's all right there.
All right, Mike, thanks so much.
John, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.